Welcome back to the Responsible Raw Materials podcast, where we explore the people and perspectives shaping what responsible raw materials really look like in practice. Today's episode brings us right down to the front line of that conversation. Because while we often talk about policies, strategies, and global frameworks, the reality of responsible mining is often decided in conversations on the ground between people, communities, and organisations trying to work together, sometimes under very challenging circumstances. I'm joined by Madhurii, who works in community development and stakeholder engagement within the mining sector in Nigeria. What makes Madhurii's story particularly compelling is that she didn't start out in mining at all. Her background is in languages, communications, and international relations. But what brought her into this space was something much more fundamental: a passion for working with people, particularly those who are often underrepresented or underserved. In this conversation, we explore what that looks like in practice. We talk about the realities of moving from a city environment like Lagos into rural communities and the cultural complexities that come with that, from language differences and local governance structures to the diversity of perspectives within communities themselves. This is a reminder that there is no such thing as a typical stakeholder. We also dig into what her role actually involves, from engaging with government and local leaders to working directly with communities. Madhurii describes herself as having one leg in and one leg out, balancing the needs and expectations of both the company and its stakeholders. And that balance is not always easy. We talk about managing expectations, particularly in a context where the presence of a gold mining company can create assumptions about wealth and immediate benefits, but also about the longer term vision, building infrastructure, capability, and opportunity that can last beyond the life of the mine. A particularly interesting part of the conversation is how she breaks down the concept of stakeholders. Not all stakeholders are the same. Some are focused on the long term, others on immediate outcomes. Some are deeply embedded in the community, and others more removed. And understanding those differences is critical to making progress. And underpinning all of this is one central idea: trust. How it is built, how it's maintained, and how ultimately it determines whether a project succeeds or fails. It's a very honest, very grounded conversation, and one that highlights the human side of responsible raw materials. I hope you enjoy it. So I'm still in Cape Town, and I'm lucky enough to be speaking with the fabulous Madhurii. Madhurii, would you like to introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Madhurii Sarkar Amoda. I'm from Nigeria, a Lagosian, and I work with our sister company, Segular Resources Operating Limited, who is the sister company for Thor Exploration in Nigeria. Unlike other people where Louise is a town planner, so she's been in this field. I am not. I didn't even start in this field at all. I have a background in French as my BA. I've got my postgraduate in mass communication, master's in mass communication, and MBA in what should I say, international relations and diplomacy. And I kind of found myself here in a weird way. So I used to work with support with helping low income housing as just an NGO rep. And I found that I had a passion for helping people. So when the opportunity came for the position, I took it based on, like I said, not the experience of mining, but just basic construction. And my passion for wanting to develop people, the less privileged, is what has been very, very instrumental in where I am today, basically.
Amazing. So, where did you grow up? What was that like?
Growing up, I grew up in Lagos. So when you say you hear people say I'm born and bred in Lagos, I'm born and bred in Lagos. We can be very myopic that the world revolves around Lagos. But yeah, going outside Lagos and taking this a kind of experience outside Lagos has opened my eyes a whole lot to a totally different world. You know, when when you born in the city, grew up in the city, schooled in the city, it's like you just feel everything revolves around the city, and then you're just thrown in a rural area, and you're thinking, oh, there's a life outside the city that you've been exposed to. I came from an average income household. Dad was a professor. Is a professor. My mom's a naval officer. So like it's just a basic Nigerian household. No, like this thing. Yeah.
And so, what has surprised you by moving to a more rural area?
Um. So, like I said, it depends on how much people understand the Nigerian culture. We have three major tribes in Nigeria. However, we have over 400 other ethnic tribes in Nigeria. Now, being a Lagosian, like I said, we always have the assumption that the world revolves around Lagos, or Nigeria revolves around Lagos. And coming from first a city to a rural area, interestingly enough, we're all in the southwest, but there's actually language barrier. So like the language barriers, there's Yoruba and then there's Yoruba with different dialects. Yoruba has got multiple dialects, about over 15, 20 dialects, which a lot of people do not understand. No, well, as a Lagosian, I just knew that, oh, there are other dialects, but I was never exposed to it because you're not coming and encountering people that you be like, but I thought I'm Yoruba, and then you're hearing someone speak a different type of like Yoruba, but it's still Yoruba. So the dialect was the first, interestingly enough, as a Nigerian culture shock, and there were other culture shock when it comes to farming. There were culture shock when it comes to culture. There was yeah, that's a as a Southwesterner, I know when people hear people say that, they're like, oh, but you find out that in a particular country or a particular region, there are different cultures there. So having that culture shock was one of the major things I experienced. I made a couple of mistakes along the way, but we've got, yes. So that was like a major thing there.
So you work with the likes of Louise, who is originally an Australian. Now, of course, she's lived and worked all over the world. But if there was the culture shock and the different dialects, that diversity of different backgrounds that you encountered, what do you think it's been like for other people coming and working on the project, such as Louise?
Well, I think Louise has got exposure with she's got experience and exposure with other countries. Now, something fascinating I might say is that I think I had less culture shock with the Western world than I had with Nigeria. It's yes, it's insane because growing up I was a voracious reader, so I read a lot. However, I didn't read about Nigeria. So I was always reading about places I have not been to, forgetting that there's actually a society and a culture in here that we haven't, that is untapped. So for Louise, I'm sure the culture shock may have been, but the thing I found very fascinating about Louise when we first met and we spoke was she's got like exposure. She understands Africa to a large extent already. She knows that the West have their culture and Africa has their culture. Then there's the Black Africa that has culture also. So you know you have the other Africans and then you have the Black, and then Nigeria is a very very indigenous, very Black African culture. So I'm sure she had like some major culture shocks also, which I experienced. I'm sure she experienced more than that. Yeah.
So coming to your day-to-day job that you're doing now. So what role are you fulfilling at the moment?
So I'm the community development and stakeholder manager. Like I said, my passion for helping people actually worked very well because I was basically in construction and people management. That's what they call them. Forgotten the role. Anyways, basically people management. I was in construction and people management, and I was go to person on having to talk to most of the people because being a firstborn girl in Nigeria, you have to take up that leadership role automatically. It's like in Africa. I'm sure if you've met Africans, you know that firstborn girls usually have that automatic leadership role, whether they want it or not. So it also helped. So as a community development and stakeholder manager, I basically handle all our stakeholders. When I say if we have to we have a government representative, government liaison officer. However, if I need to step in for with the government, I go in there. If I need to step in with the host communities, I go in there. If I need to step with the local governments, I go in there. So basically, you put it as the layman's term is the CLO. Yes. So, and the thing is, I've got one leg in and one leg out. It's like when I say one leg in, yes. So I have to ensure that um, the organization or the company does right by the community, even if they are not happy or even if they don't want to hear it. I have to say what people don't want to hear in the company. And then with the community, I need to also learn to manage, or I had to learn how to manage expectations. Because you go in somewhere and they say they want, next thing they are requesting for, they don't have doctors and they tell you they want a hospital. And the next question I ask is, where will you get the doctors? And they'll be like, oh, you provide the doctors for us. And I'm like, we're a mining company. We're not. So expectations like that. Over time, you build that trust. Over time, it gets better. But when we started, it was insane. So from the organization aspect, interestingly enough, we have to manage expectations within the organization and manage expectations with our stakeholders. um at the same time, not only managing expectations but ensuring that no one is shortchanged, organization is not shortchanged, and the stakeholders, all our stakeholders are not shortchanged.
So, who is more difficult, the company or the stakeholders?
That's a very interesting question. Now, I always liken my position to, or the department, to a human resources department. Now, the human resources department handles just the employees, and you are like, take it or leave it. Employees, and if you're not satisfied, you can actually move. But with the external stakeholders, you can't do that. So most times you have to come in an African setting. You have to ensure that there is respect, there is groveling. Yes, there is sometimes you get like insulted. Yes. And you just have to get them to understand that I understand where you're coming from. However, we'll ensure that you're not shortchanged here. And please don't shortchange. It's been a difficult process. So, question again: who is more difficult? Yes, it's the stakeholders. Stakeholders are really more difficult because once the thing is, like we do gold, and gold is a very very expensive commodity. So everybody see gold, and everything they're hearing, the only thing they see is money. So they see you, they see money, and then even if you're making like one third or one hundredth of what they think you're making, they don't care. They need you to cough out that money. So yeah. So at the end of the day, like I said, managing expectation, the not community, but the stakeholders are usually more difficult. And when I mean stakeholders, I mean every stakeholder you have. You have stakeholders that actually can be reasonable and help and support with other stakeholders, but most of the time the stakeholders are more difficult to handle and manage than the organization. Organization wants results. However, they also want results, positive results, that also give good publicity, good image for the organization. But with and then also no downtime, production goes on, and however you get it done, as long as it's ethical, they're on board with that.
So sometimes when you're working with stakeholders, and as you say, people just they go, "Oh, you're a gold mining company, so there must be loads of money, and we want this now." But actually, quite a lot of what we're trying to build is not necessarily for the benefit to be felt immediately. We're actually trying to think, well, at some point, the gold is going to run out in the ground, so we're trying to build the infrastructure or the ecosystem that can then thrive after the gold has been extracted from the ground. Do you find that stakeholders understand that in terms of the long-term value, not just the short-term value?
So now the only time you get stakeholders that actually understand that are stakeholders, when I think a lot of time we tend to use the term stakeholder loosely. Now a stakeholder from my own perspective is someone that has vested interest in the project long term. Once you have met someone that is just interested, once you encounter a stakeholder loosely now that has a temporary um should I say interest in the project, it's difficult to communicate that. Now I'll give you an example. Stakeholders I deal with government, I deal with politicians, you deal with communities, you deal with people in diaspora from the communities. I'll give you two examples. The people in diaspora from the community, they are not interested in the long term. They are looking for instant gratification. Now, if you have the stakeholder on ground that actually has family there, is building there, he's got his farm there, he's got his entire life there. Usually they are more interested in long term um investments from the company than the other one. I'll give you another example. If you have a stakeholder that is the head of the community, like the king, a lot of times those ones are interested in development long term because they also want to make a name for their community. But if you have a head of the community that is not based in the community, you got another problem there. They are just interested. Yes, so it's a dicey situation. So at the end of the day, that's why I said the term stakeholder it's used loosely. However, there's a somewhere at the back of my mind. I'm thinking that there are different type of stakeholder, multiple stakeholders, and each person you need to also look at for when they're where they're coming from. But on the long run, yes, with what I'm working with at the moment, you need to build trust. If you do not build that trust, and when I mean build trust, if you're going to, that's why I mentioned managing expectations first. If you're going to agree with them on certain developments, make sure you are going to go hell or high water, pardon my French, to deliver on that. If you cannot deliver it, don't promise it, no matter how much pressure you're going through. Because over time, your word is practically your bond. And that trust you're going to be building over time, they know that, oh, even if I'm not able to deliver at the moment based on certain things, they know that I'm going to deliver in the next 3 to 6 months. And you build that trust over time. And that trust actually cascades and ripple, it's a ripple effect practically to all your, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you're saying and what you're communicating to people. What happens is a lot of time people actually go or investors go um, organizations go and just find out from those ground level stakeholders if you're actually delivering. So building that trust and integrity is very important at the end of the day.
Absolutely. In terms of moving forwards, so let's imagine it is, I don't know, 15 years into the future. What do you hope to be doing with your life?
Well, first and foremostly, I really want to be in a position to be able to impact um, people at a large scale. I feel like it's really minor right now. When I say impact, I think I've got a lot in here and in here to give out to a lot of people and get people to understand you can actually um you can actually source ethically with integrity and still deliver both for organization and for the your stakeholders. A lot of time I think it's usually greed that makes you want to cut corners, and I've seen it over time with what I do. So I'm hoping to be in a position in a place where most likely you're looking at consultancy or bigger organizations where I can actually do that impacts more people and understand that you can actually source ethically. Yeah, if you're not looking to make like and shortchange anybody without with integrity. Because integrity is really lacking right now. You know where I'm coming from. Yeah. So integrity is it's not valued like that. So one of the things that I am happy working with this organization, my organization, is that we value integrity. Integrity is very, very important. Once your integrity is compromised, it's difficult. So I'm hoping to be in a place where I can communicate that you can actually get all the way there, even with integrity.
So, if you could change one thing or improve one thing about the mining sector as it currently stands, what would it be?
The rehabilitation. I'm looking at it from Nigerian perspective, not internationally, because we're looking at other countries. They've done amazing. They've done other organizations have done well, and we're just lacking. We're not. Yeah, we're still lacking a whole lot. Or there's a gap that is a vacuum that is there, in the sense that Thor is Segulala is the first large scale mine company in Nigeria. They've been mining gold for over 50 years in Nigeria. They've been mining other minerals for over 50 years. We're the first to actually utilize our regulations and policies. So there's a lot of change that needs to be done there. If I could change anything, one of the things is going to be our the land utilization, so that, see, now when you make it easy for investors to come in, they can actually plan with the community stakeholders in mind, not just because you've got the local governments, you've got the state government, and then you've got the federal governments. So there's still that gap between the federal government and the state government, and the state government and the local government, the local government and the communities. There's a lot of this chasm there that has not been filled. So that there needs to be a bridge there. So now, if there's something I can change, yeah, we should be looking um at the Land Use Act for mining, because in Nigeria you don't buy, you rent. So that's a major problem already for any person. You're renting. What happens? And then you're renting and renting and renting. It's just like infinity renting. There's not that. And then two, that's from the organizational point of view. There should be concrete rehabilitation options for host communities, so that they understand that at the end of the day, it's not vague. This is what's going to be done. There are policies, there are regulations there. However, no structure and no implementation. So I'll be looking to actually push for implementation of those things.
So, going back to where you started, so not just in Lagos, but studying French, has that come in useful to what you do now?
I mentioned that I was also a voracious reader, so I get exposed to different, like, multiple culture. One of the things I'm passionate about is learning other people's culture. And being exposed to the French culture when I was in school was one of the things I found fascinating. Understanding that there are different types of culture. It's not like you meet when we're growing up, we're not exposed to like lots of Westerners. So it's just the few ones you meet, and then you just assume a Westerner is a Westerner. But you find out that at the end of the day, the French Westerner is different from the English Westerner. The English Westerner is different from American, is different from the ones from the Netherlands. Same thing here. So that's also helped. Yes. So to a large extent, also made me to understand. So the language, not so much, but the culture, yes, actually did help.
Brilliant. So, with that, Madhurii, thank you so much for speaking to us here today. Absolutely fascinating hearing your perspective with regards to engaging with different stakeholders, and I wish you all the luck with regards to the rest of the project.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
So that was my conversation with Madhurii. And I think that what really stands out in this episode is just how human the challenge of responsible raw materials really is. Because at its core, it isn't just about resources or regulations, it's about people. One of the things that really struck me is the complexity behind what we often simplify as stakeholder engagement. It's very easy to talk about stakeholders as if they're a single group, but as Madhurii explains, that can be further from the truth. You have communities, local leaders, governments, politicians, all with different perspectives, different incentives, and often very different expectations. And that means that there's no single approach that works for everyone. Another point that really resonated is the idea of managing expectations. In a context where mining, particularly gold mining, is associated with wealth, it's perhaps inevitable that communities expect immediate benefits. But the reality is often far more complex. Much of what companies are trying to build, whether it's infrastructure, capacity, or longer term economic opportunities, takes time. And that creates a tension between short term expectations and long term value. What's interesting is how Maduri approaches that challenge, not by overpromising, but by being very clear about what can and cannot be delivered, and by ensuring that when commitments are made, they are followed through. Because ultimately, that is what builds trust. And trust, as she makes very clear, is everything. It's not just about what you say, it's about what you do. And over time, those actions create a reputation that extends far beyond individual conversations. Another aspect I found particularly insightful is the way she differentiates between types of stakeholders. The idea that those who are directly connected to the land, who live there, work there, and have a long term stake in its future, often think very differently from those who are more removed, perhaps geographically or economically. And that has important implications for how decisions are made and communicated. It also highlights the importance of context, something that has come through in all of these conversations, whether it's cultural context, economic context, or political context. These factors shape how people perceive value, risk, and potential threat and opportunity. If we don't understand that, we risk misinterpreting both challenges and solutions. Finally, I think Madhuri's perspective on integrity is a really powerful note to end on. The idea that it is possible to operate ethically, to deliver value for both organisations and communities without compromising on integrity, but that doing so requires discipline, it requires consistency, and it requires resisting the temptation to take shortcuts. And perhaps most importantly, it requires a long-term mindset. Because responsible raw materials isn't just about what happens today, it's about what we leave behind, and whether the systems, relationships, and opportunities we create are strong enough to endure beyond the life of a project. That is not an easy challenge, but conversations like this remind us that it's a very real one, and one that's being navigated every day by people working on the ground. And that ultimately is what responsible raw materials is all about. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.